with us on this Thursday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. It's not the news cycle, it's the Trump cycle. This happens with everything this gentleman says. Trump goes out and he says something. Then there's the media coverage and interpretation. And then there's the GOP reaction. Then there's the public reaction. Then there's the backlash. And then there's the clarification. It happens every time he says something. So right now we're in the clarification stage of this most recent dust-up of what he has said about Muslims in this country, to the point where he's coming back saying actually he has Muslim friends who thinks he's doing the right thing and he's doing the Muslims a favor. And you know what's going to happen at the end of this Trump cycle? The poll numbers are going to go up again. I don't believe that Trump is going to be damaged at all by this. You have to look at this in the totality of what the Republicans have done over the last 7 years. They have coached the Republican base to hate Obama. They have coached the Republican Party to be nothing but obstructors of any kind of progress in this country and make Obama the focal point of all problems. So Trump comes along and says, well, this is what I think we should do. And everybody just follows right into it. 65% of Republicans are saying that they agree with Trump that not to let Muslims into the country would be a good way to protect America until we, quote, get our act together. That's how he terms it. Well, folks, it's a business situation. If they're buying it, you keep delivering the product. And the Trump cycle is going to continue on. And now we've moved into this phase of, well, what about this pledge? Because the Republicans are sitting there thinking, damn, he just might win this thing. You know, but we signed a pledge. But wait a minute, now we got to go back on it. I find it hilarious. So here we go in the clarification stage now to make sure we all know exactly what Trump meant and what he really believes. Is we're in the mop-up stage or the clarification stage, so he's doing these interviews. Who doesn't want to interview Donald Trump right now? Everybody does. Everybody wants to know how he's going to manage this, keeping Muslims out of the country until we, quote, get our act together. So he sits down with CNN and says this.
Let's talk about this proposal, right? You adjusted it slightly so that it would say that you would let American Muslims who are traveling overseas return to the country. This doesn't apply to U.S. citizens?
It never did. From day one, it never did. I don't know why people thought it did. This applies to people coming into the country, and all it is a break till our politicians, who are grossly incompetent, by the way, can get their act together.
So what about foreign diplomats or people from Muslim countries who are coming into the country?
Certainly exceptions can be made. I mean, we're not going to say you can't come into the country. And the one thing people didn't pick up, at the end of that sentence, it said, until we get our hands around it, essentially, until we find out what the hell is going on, which is the expression I used. Now, I could go quickly, but you know what? It's a subject that has to be discussed.
So the clarification is it's just a subject we need to discuss. He's really not a Nazi, and everybody still wants to talk to him. It's the Trump cycle. There's so many facets to it. He says something, then of course there's media interpretation, and then there's outrage, and then there's GOP reaction, then there's public reaction, then the polls go up, and everybody talks to him. Okay. Now he's saying that the Muslims, his friends, are right behind him.
We released three national polls last week. Three polls last week. The national poll, Iowa, New Hampshire, you're ahead by far. And then you release this controversial statement. Why not just sit on your big lead and just let it ride?
Because, Don, I have to do what's right. We need a dialogue in this country and throughout the world. We have a big problem. And as you know, I have many friends who are Muslims. They're phenomenal people. They are so happy at what I'm doing. I was called by 3 people today, very big. They said, you are doing a tremendous service, because unless people are going to be talking about it, it's never going to be so. The public agrees with what I said. They saw those 2 animals last week go out and shoot people, and the husband and wife, the wife came here on a phony visa, on a visa that, frankly, it's disgraceful that she was able to come in, and she probably radicalized him. Yeah. She had a fiancé visa. And a disgusting, disgraceful
There
thing.
you have it. Trump has a unique way of making what he says, which seems outrageous, to sound relevant. He is a master at that. He is an excellent communicator, and he's also continuing to create problems for the Republican Party. Now, I take issue with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, says that this isn't conservatism. This isn't the Republican Party. This isn't America. Well, then why is it that 65% of Republicans agree with Donald Trump? You see, Trump is giving the Republican Party an opportunity to look normal. He says it's not American. Is it American to vote down health care 50 times in the House, to take health care away from 17 million Americans? Now, I know that's another subject, but don't come across as if you're all of a sudden this heartfelt person that cares about the American neighbor next door, Mr. Ryan. Come on, you're as heartless as any of them. The Republicans are still the Republicans. They're all about privatization. They're all about profit. They got nothing to do with people. And they don't even know where their people are. The Republicans are with Trump on this. Yet the leadership is trying to distance themselves from him. They got some identity problems. There's no question about that. All right, so now we go to the point of contention, which is now the pledge. Oh, my God. What's going to happen here? All of these Republicans were asked in a debate to raise their hand. All of these Republicans were asked if they'd sign a pledge. Here's John Kasich trying to weasel out of it.
I signed a pledge. That's why you have to be careful what pledges you sign, that I would support the Republican nominee. Now, look, is it possible that you change your mind? Yeah. It takes something extreme to do it. But I will tell you, sir, there's no way that Donald Trump's going to be president.
And that's exactly what they said about Barack Obama, who, when he announced in February of 2007, only 18% of African Americans in this country knew who the hell he was. And I'm sure that the poll numbers coming out of New Hampshire certainly don't favor Bernie Sanders. Well, they do, by 10 points. You don't know what's going to happen. The horses are just getting the gate. Nobody's running yet. The fact is, we still got a long way to go. And Iowa doesn't hang the moon. It's one state. It's a caucus state. It's a beginning benchmark, but it's not the end of the line. And so there's a lot of water that has to go under the bridge. And for these Republicans to come out this early being worried about whether they're going to live up to their pledge just underscores that they know the power of Trump. They know the Trump cycle, and they're starting to come to the realization they probably won't be able to defeat him. When we come back, cool, country origin labeling and the World Trade Organization delivers a big blow to American producers. That's next on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Stay with us. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit. Good to have you back with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. The other day on my Facebook, I posted a Give Me a Minute talking about the World Trade Organization and what they have done to the United States and producers. Years ago in the Farm Bill, we had country origin labeling put in. In other words, the food would be labeled. The beef and pork and chicken would be labeled in your grocery store because it would help producers. It's a food security issue. Well, of course, some other countries, such as Canada and Mexico, have complained vehemently about it, filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, and now this international tribunal is telling the United States that we are facing $1 billion in sanctions and fines if we don't fix this. For more on this, let's turn to President of the National Farmers Union, Roger Johnson. Roger, good to have you back with us.
Good to be with you, Ed. It's quite a deal, isn't it?
Well, it really is. It's basically an outside organization telling the United States this is what you're going to do, and this is what's going to happen. How else do we interpret that?
You know, there's really not a good other way to interpret it. And if you want to really understand how bad it is, the tribunal that found against us was chaired by a Mexican national who used to work for the Mexican government as a trade official. And so you have these private sector folks. This is basically multinational corporations that in many ways run this dispute resolution system at the WTO and overrule sovereign laws of nations like ours. And it's just wrong. And, cool isn't just about the producers and about national security. It's about consumers. Consumers by 90% plus margins over 10 years of data show they want to know. They want to know more and more about their food. They support this law.
Well, that is the key. When you go into the grocery store, over 90% of Americans want to know where their food's coming from. This strips down that barrier, and it also greases the skids for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the next deal that the president is pushing. That beef could be from Vietnam and have a USDA stamp on it, and it wouldn't mean anything. You wouldn't know what quality of beef you're getting.
Yeah. In fact, if the Congress repeals this law, and so far the House of Representatives has already done that, and not only did they repeal what the WTO found against, which was beef and pork, they repealed poultry, ground beef, and ground pork. So they went way beyond even what the WTO found. So if Congress does that, if they repeal it and stick it on the omnibus, which is the conversation that's happening right now, we will be back in a situation where a multinational meat company can bring an animal in from anywhere in the world, slaughter it here, put a made in the USA label on the meat that comes from it, and peddle it as a U.S. product.
And in this next trade agreement, there's going to be quotas that we are going to have to accept a certain amount of their agricultural products, aren't we?
That may be true. I'm not sure about the quota piece. You probably know that better than I do, Ed. I do know that the beef deal that we got with TPP is nothing to brag about.
Yeah.
The biggest access we get is to the Japanese market, and they basically give us about a 2 to 3% increase in what our sales are from year to year. And if we ever exceed that, then they snap back to the 38% tariffs.
Okay.
So we're right back to where we are today.
We're visiting with Roger Johnson, president of the National Farmers Union. This ruling by the WTO smacking $1 billion worth of sanctions is going to force the congressional hand. The representatives are going to put it in the omnibus bill, and they're going to strip cool out, although the public wants cool. Now, this also sets the table for corporations in the TPP going further to sue in our country if they don't get the kind of results they want. I mean, this is just a slippery slope all the way. This is the United States Congress caving. Now, what recourse could we have to push back on this WTO ruling?
That's a really good question, because there's not much. We as a country signed into the WTO. We agreed to abide by its rules and its rulings. And if we don't, and the president made this statement that there's nothing that these trade agreements are going to, they're not going to change any of our laws. Technically, he's correct. By themselves, they can't change the laws. But what they will do is exactly what they're doing with cool. They put $1 billion sanction on you, and what choice do you have? So what we would suggest that the Congress does is leave it off the omnibus. I mean, the reason the American people are so disgusted with congressional performance is because they don't get anything done all year. And then at the very last minute, on the big omnibus appropriations bills, which if they don't pass, it shuts down the government, they literally tack dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation that they couldn't get through the Congress in regular order. They tack them onto that bill, and then they pass them. And it's that kind of stuff acting in the dark of night is why the American people are so disgusted with this performance. They ought to leave it alone and take it up under regular order and debate it, and they'll find an alternative that makes some sense.
Do you have allies in Congress that are going to fight this? I mean, I know that there are some. The House has already voted to get rid of cool. Hell, you had the Ag Secretary, Vilsack from Iowa, telling the Congress that they had to strip this out. That's how corrupt this whole thing is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to tell me beef producers in Iowa don't want labeling? Come on.
I mean, there is a legitimate resolution to this that would at least say, hey, if you're going to repeal beef and pork, replace it with a requirement on a voluntary label. So no one's required to label, but if they do label, they cannot label a product as a product of the U.S. unless it's born, raised, and slaughtered in the U.S. They're even opposing that. Now, that is an alternative that's out there. I would say the chances of that getting attached to the omnibus are not good, but it is certainly something that they could do if they wanted to attach something to the omnibus that is not so crazy offensive to the American people.
Roger Johnson, always great to visit. Keep up the fight, my friend. I appreciate your time.
Good to be with you, Ed. You take care.
You bet. President of National Farmers Union, Roger Johnson, with us. When we come back, Joe Sestak joining us. He, of course, is running for the United States Senate, joesestak.com. He'll have some reaction to Donald Trump's proposal about dealing with Muslim immigrants and a ban that he wants to have on them entering the country. That's next. Stay with us.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
So Donald Trump wants to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. As we fight terrorism around the globe, one of his ideas, which has gotten a firestorm of coverage and criticism as of late, is to keep Muslims out of the country temporarily until our representatives, quote, figure out what the hell is going on. But how would this affect the military? What would this in any way put us in a very ominous position with countries that were trying to get on board to fight ISIS? For more on that, let's go to Admiral Joe Sestak. He is running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania. Joe, good to have you back with us.
Good to be with you, Ed. Thanks.
What do you anticipate the military reaction to this being, that we start picking and choosing human beings who can come into the United States when we're trying to really embrace the Muslim world, the Arab world, to fight ISIS?
The military will, obviously, as always, keep its mouth shut and keep stepping forward. But its leadership will actually have it very consciously in their minds, because a lot of what we do at the top level in the military is do the engagement with leaders of these countries that at times our men and women walk through. For example, when the Arab Spring was happening, and if you remember, Egypt was going down in some very difficult ways, and the military was about to impose a dictatorship there, it was the president turned to our military leaders to talk with them. We do the same thing in Pakistan. General Zinni, retired, would go out and talk with them. The chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff would talk with them, because the militaries in these countries often control so much. And so our military leaders aren't being helped by this at all, because when you have someone who could potentially, let's hope it's not going to happen, become the leader of the United States as commander-in-chief like Donald Trump wants to be, and he's saying no Muslims, my gosh, of course it makes a significant problem. And on a lower level, well, we all know that idea is to actually inflame people. Yeah, does it make a problem? You bet it does.
So this was really a tunnel vision by Donald Trump, not realizing the global ramifications that we are attempting to be a global partner with the Arab world to fight ISIS. And it's kind of tough to go in militarily and negotiate or work out some type of coordinated effort when you come from the position, by the way, we're not letting people of your faith into our country for a while until we get it together. It just, I don't know how you get around that.
You said it well, Ed. Look, President Clinton talked about what leadership is, to elevate the condition of men. Leaders are supposed to be rising people to a higher level. Donald Trump, all he does is prey upon concerns, at times fears of people. He doesn't higher expectations. He lowers our character by actually denigrating and playing to the most base of motives. this is a leader? Absolutely not.
And yet
nobody in the United States military would follow a person in battle like that out there if he was platoon leader, because you know that he's about himself and politicizing anything to gain what he wants. That's all it's about.
Interesting. And yet he is trying to figure out where all the hatred's coming from. Here it is.
So you have been saying that until we figure out what's going on. What exactly does that mean? Figure out what? What is there to figure out?
Why is there such hatred and such viciousness? Why is somebody willing to fly airplanes into the World Trade Center and go after it even prior to that? They failed, although they did tremendous damage by any normal standard. And then after they failed, they went and they actually took airplanes into the World Trade Center. Where does this hatred come from? Why does it come? We have to figure it out because we have problems. So when you surveil the mosques, I took a lot of heat for the surveillance of the mosques. Well, now other people are saying, well, we have to surveil the mosques.
What do you think of that, Admiral?
How inexcusable, how shameful. Much as Joe Welch said to Joe McCarthy during the communist witch hunts, to Senator Joe McCarthy, have you no decency, sir? Look, I walked on the ground in a Muslim country in Afghanistan when I headed the Navy's anti-terrorism unit. I fought alongside my carrier battle group as we were doing strikes with those of the Muslim faith. They would have laid down their life for me, and I for them. To all of a sudden say, no, we don't welcome those of the Muslim faith is absolutely inexcusable. He is shameful.
Isn't it hard to believe that 65% of the Republicans agree with Trump?
I find that number, when I read it this morning, kind of set me back. And this is my concern. People have to understand, who are in public office today, that their job is to be out there. This is America. We are a democracy about leadership. Yes, there's the conflict of ideas, but if we don't have those down in Washington, D.C., standing up on both sides and filling the vacuum to gain the trust of people and telling them that this war is absolutely one we must fight, but it is about people who are criminals. It is not about a faith, and we will have a false prophet, someone who wants to shame our best character, actually filling that void. If there was a time for leadership, it's now, and we don't have enough of it right now. And unfortunately, Trump is filling the air.
Admiral Joe Sestak, you can find him at Joe Sestak, Sestak, and that is .com. JoeSestak.com, running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania, spent 30 years in military intelligence, Admiral in the Navy. Admiral, good to have you with us, always.
Good to be with you. Have a great day.
You bet. You too. When we come back, Dean Obeidallah will join us, Sirius XM radio talk show host. What are his listeners saying about Trump? That's next.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Trump continues to roll, leading in the polls, handily, I might add. Not in some places, but everywhere, state polls and national polls. This is Trump saying that he has business interests in the Middle East, and he's getting a lot of support for what he's saying.
You have big business interests in the Middle East.
Yeah.
People are wondering, why are you continuing to do business in the Middle East if you have such concerns?
Because I have great relationships with people. And I love the Middle East. I love the people of the Middle East.
But are you worried about your bottom line being affected by the policy
Maybe
that
it
you're
is.
proposing?
Look, maybe it will be. Look, that's one of those things. What I'm doing now is far more important. And I'm talking about for the Muslims. Mm-hmm. I'm doing good for the Muslims. What I'm doing now is far more important than any particular business I have in the Middle East. I'm doing a big favor. I was just called by one of the most important people of the Middle East and just said to me, Donald, you have done a tremendous service to the Muslims, because nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to be so politically correct. Oh, let everybody come in. We have a problem, and the problem has to be solved.
Dean Obeidallah, Sirius XM radio talk show host and Daily Beast contributor, joins us here in Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Well, Dean, big favor and doing a tremendous service. Your reaction to that?
I'm not sure who he's doing a service for, not even for his own campaign. If you look at the poll numbers that came out, yes, within the GOP, according to a Bloomberg poll from yesterday, 65% of Republicans support what he's doing. But among all voters, it's completely negative. He's united Republicans to do something I never thought was possible. They stood up, from Paul Ryan to Dick Cheney to Jeb Bush, they stood up for Muslims. This is unheard of. I've written so many articles about the GOP demonizing Muslims. Who would have thought less than 2 weeks after a terrorist attack on our land by Muslims that Donald Trump's rhetoric is so extreme, he's caused good people to say enough is enough, and we're going to stand up and say this is wrong and you can't demonize Muslims like this. So that's the silver lining to me in all of this.
So basically Trump is saying, listen to this, trust me.
I'm not sure. Trust me what? I watched that interview with Don Lemon, and Trump's saying things like, I love Muslims, and Muslims are telling me they like this. Maybe there are. I wrote about for the Daily Beast earlier this week how Trump does love Muslim money. He's got big partners in Dubai, like Hussein Sajwani, who's a huge multi-millionaire, where they have the Trump golf course about to open up, the Trump private mansions. They're called Trump private mansions, beginning at $1 million a pop. So I have no doubt he loves money, Trump, and when he's over there in the Middle East, he says, I love Muslims. When he's here in the U.S. trying to get votes, he says, I don't like Muslims.
So what are we seeing happen here? You've got 65% of registered Republicans saying that they agree with Trump, yet you've got the leadership, as you mentioned, from Paul Ryan to one of the godfathers, Dick Cheney, godfather of destruction, saying that, no, that's not us. I mean, I think Trump is giving the Republican Party an opportunity to look normal when we all know that they're radical as hell. What do you think?
Well, that's a really good point because, on some level, like, well, the GOP leadership saying this is horrible and this is wrong, and then the rank and file going, no, I love this. It's troubling. But at the same time, I really believe the fact that the establishment Republicans are saying it's wrong will move some in the GOP to go, it's gone too far. Because the Bloomberg poll was very interesting. It showed only 22% of Republicans opposed it. Then they explained to the Republican people they were polling, well, the leadership of your party has come out against it, world leaders have come out against it, and the number of opposition went from 22 to 28%. So I think the fact the leaders came out and said it was wrong it'll pick others in the GOP away from supporting the Trump plan. So on some level, again, I'm looking for silver linings here, Ed. It's a horrible plan, what he's saying. The idea, he's clearly demonizing Muslims. This is not about a policy. We all know you can't impose this. What are you going to do? At customs, make people eat a bacon cheeseburger to prove they're not a Muslim? I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's laughable. But it's scary because he's playing on the worst fears. And I think a real leader, in a time of fear, doesn't play to those fears. They stand up and say, we're united. We're united in our resolve. It's all of us against ISIS. It's not all of us against Muslims. And that's what Donald Trump is saying. And he's a scared man.
This is Trump on his position.
Are you racist?
I am the least racist person that you have ever met. I am the least racist person.
Are you bigoted in any way?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Islamophobic?
I'm a person, no, not at all. I'm a person who happens to be very smart, and I happen to have a certain street sense, and I know where things are going.
Dean, he's smart. He has a street sense. He knows where things are going.
He does, and he knows he may not personally be an anti-Muslim bigot. I wrote an article for CNN that came out last night. I'm more afraid of Trump's supporters than I am Donald Trump. He may or may not believe any of this. Nobody knows. The reality is his supporters do, and he's touching into that. He's legitimizing their fears, legitimizing their hate, and sadly can radicalize and inspire them to commit acts of violence. That's my greatest fear. We saw it in the civil rights movement. George Wallace said segregation today, tomorrow, and forever. There were bombings in Birmingham shortly after that against black churches, against black leaders. It's not a vacuum. We know the history. Politicians' words mean something, and when they're demonizing people, when they're legitimizing hate, the next step could be more than voting. It could be bullets.
There's one more political facet to all of this that I think needs some discussion, and that is what Donald Trump is doing is the best thing that ever happened to Hillary Clinton. You know, do you know where Bernie Sanders was yesterday in the news? He was on page A30 in the New York Times. Sanders gets very little attention because Trump is sucking all the air out of the room, and yet there's this conventional political wisdom out there, oh, Hillary's got it. Although there's a poll in New Hampshire showing that Sanders leads by 10%. He's having a hard time getting attention. Got very little attention for going to Baltimore a couple of days ago, talking to the faith leaders there and talking to the leaders of the African-American community. Do we remember what happened in Baltimore? And there's a trial going on there now, Freddie Gray. Bernie is out there addressing the key issues, getting very little attention because he doesn't, I guess, have the Hollywood swagger or the contemporary swagger, however you want to look at it. But the fact is that his base is still with him. It's still very strong, and I don't think it's a lock for Hillary. Your thoughts?
I agree, and that new poll, which showed that Hillary was down by 10 points in New Hampshire, is very interesting a couple of days ago. But Trump has sucked up the oxygen for everyone. When's the last time you heard about Hillary's email server issue or Benghazi or real political policy issues from Bernie Sanders? Trump has dominated the news to a point where we don't talk about anything at all besides this very issue. And it's unfortunate. At some point, the media will become, in my dreams, they'll become responsible like you, covering substantive issues. But they're about ratings, they're about clicks, and substantive issues don't get clicks, but this kind of reality show politician world does get a lot of people talking, and they're going to keep covering that, and we'll never hear about the issues until this election is over, perhaps. And that would be scary.
Dean Obeidallah joining us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. All the best on your show.
Thanks,
Keep it
Ed.
going. Thank you, Dean.
Appreciate it.
Ed Schultz News and Commentary brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. We're back tomorrow.